LA Kings fans chime in on Drew Doughty's health. Disappointing games, biggest goals, our Daryl Evans interview, and I got to give props to Ed in Brea. That and more on this fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show going on in its 20th year of putting out a show every week. And I'm also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. It is time for another LA Kings fan feedback show, your chance to complain, praise, question, celebrate, and pontificate about our Los Angeles Kings. We have a nice mix of new emailers and regulars, so let's get into it. And we start with Steve in Ventura. And he says, hey, Eddie, catching up on the pods and just heard about Doughty and the Four Nations Olympic decision. I agree with you about the Olympics. That would be a nice break for him if he doesn't make the team, although he might party too much if he is getting the break, so maybe not. However, I disagree a bit about the Four Nations. Assuming he was fully healed, all the players on the team, he probably needed the extra games more than anyone. As you know, it's hard to get back into game shape after not skating all season, and those games probably got him up to speed faster than he would have been otherwise. I believe Mike Fuda and or Elliot Friedman said as much when he came back from injury. If he wanted to come back, he might have been slower and or worse shape for the playoffs if he waited to come back. Fuda also thought he would have been on the team from the beginning if he didn't get injured, so he was a natural choice to step in for Pietrangelo, who stepped out. I do agree that if he wasn't fully healed, he shouldn't have rushed back to play, but why would team doctors clear him? He can't just say, I'm playing, and they say, okay, all right. He definitely wasn't back to 100% ability, but I don't think he would have been regardless of the Four Nations. Joint injuries take forever to get back into full range of motion, even if they are fully healed. And that is Steve in Ventura. Well, Steve, if you have any kind of medical training, I will defer to you on that. But one thing about injuries, and yes, of course, the medical staff is going to look at the x-rays and probably do some sort of tests with him. But it's kind of like when you go to your doctor, you have to be honest about how you feel, because what you're telling the doctors goes a long way in what ultimately their opinion is going to be. And this is just an opinion. It's not a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Drew Doughty was telling the doctors, I'm good to go, even if he wasn't 100%. So while you can, argue that, yeah, he needed some time to shake off the rust to be ready for the playoffs. Again, I don't know that he was 100% healthy. And I think he did rush back so he could play in the Four Nations. I think it would have benefited him and the Kings more if he would have had that extra time to heal up and then, try and shake off whatever rust he could later in the season. But again, that's my opinion. I don't know that that's a fact, but I know that he has said afterwards that he wasn't 100%. I think watching him in the playoffs, he didn't look 100%. And there was never a report that he had re-aggravated the injury or that, he got re-injured. So I'm just, putting two and two together and saying that he probably wasn't 100% when he came back. And that playing in the Four Nations, I don't think helped the issue. Lewis checks in from Atlantic, Canada. So I'm a bit of a geography buff. I love looking at maps and trying to figure out where things are. So when Lewis said he's in Atlantic, Canada, I wondered, what does that exactly mean? So I looked it up, and Atlantic Canada is also called the Atlantic Provinces in the East region of Canada, comprising 4 provinces: New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. So I guess it's, if we were going to compare it to someplace in the United States, it's referring to a region. Like if you said, I'm Lewis in New England, that could obviously entail several different states, but you kind of get the region. So anyway, Lewis is checking in Atlantic Canada. And he says, great job with the show. Thank you, Lewis. I'm an avid Kings fan, and this is a great podcast. I'm glad you found us, and I'm glad you decided to email Lewis. He says it's especially engaging during the summer months of the off season. Responding to a question from your August 9th fan feedback show, I've heard the 1998 through 2002 Kings logo referred to as both the shield and also the coat of arms logo. The shield jersey holds a special place for me. I started following the Kings around 1998 when Rob Blake won the Norris. I loved his hard-hitting style of defensive play, and he immediately became my favorite player. That offseason, the Kings unveiled the shield jersey, which is my all-time favorite. The purple, silver, and black was the sharpest look in the NHL. In 2001, after 9/11, the jersey also honored Ace Bailey and Mark Davis with an iconic memorial patch. I'd like to see the team hit the nostalgia button and bring back an updated version of this for their third jersey. I'm also into the idea of bringing back the concept of home white and road dark jerseys across the league. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for your time. That was Lewis in Atlantic Canada. I've talked about this before. The coat of arms logo is probably one of my least favorite logos. But that said, one of my favorite jerseys to wear, ironically, is one of the coat of arms jerseys, and it's a Rob Blake jersey, which he autographed for me. I've got it here. I'm going to hold it up briefly for those watching on YouTube. And the thing I love about this jersey is probably the purple, because I'm a big purple fan, and it's got the purple on the shoulders. It's got the purple around the bottom with the Los Angeles. And on the back, the purple number and name looks really cool. And I don't know if you can see it on here or not, but Rob Blake did autograph this number 4 here. You see it? And it is right. This is awful for podcasters, but it's right here. You autographed it. I don't know. Can you see that? There you go. Kind of see it. All right. Anyway, that's enough show and tell. Actually, I lied. I also have the Ace Bailey, Mark Davis 9/11 patch. I don't have it on a jersey, but I do own the patch. It was a very nice, beautiful patch. I've always considered putting it on a jersey, maybe even that Blake jersey, but I never have. But I will say that, Lewis, I totally agree about the white home road dark jerseys across the league. I've been beating that drum for a while to no avail, but I've always wanted to see the different colors of the road teams in the arena. As it is now, you get the same thing every game. The road team's white and the home team's dark, or in this case with the Kings, black. It's very boring. I want to see the red of the Blackhawks. I want to see the blue of the Canucks, the red of the Panthers, whatever. I want to see those colors, and I don't know why they changed it. I hate it. So you and I are 100% in agreement on that is what they should go back to. Frank in Ranchos Palos Verdes says, good afternoon, Eddie. Since it is the dog days of hockey summer, I thought I would share these 3 lists with you. My favorite 5 Kings of all time are, and this is from Frank and RVP, number 1, Butch Goring, number 2, Marcel Dion, number 3, Dave Lewis. Quick note on Lewis, I loved his incredible shot blocking skill, and also for taking that high stick and the coconut from Gary Unger of the arrogant Oilers, resulting in a 5-minute major penalty. This, of course, happened near the end of the Kings' greatest ever game, the Miracle on Manchester. I hope, Frank, you enjoyed our interview with Daryl Evans this week talking about the Miracle on Manchester. I remember Dave Lewis as an assistant on those great Red Wings teams. His playing time was before my time, as was Goring and Dion. He has number 4, Adam Deadmarsh, and number 5, Andrei Kopitar. His greatest top 5 players in Kings history, number 1, Marcel Dion, number 2, Andrei Kopitar, number 3, Jonathan Quick, number 4, Drew Doughty, and number 5, Dave Taylor. The last list is one I haven't seen before. Would love to hear your picks on this as well. The top lines in LA Kings history, the caveat being that all 3 players had to play on the same line for at least 1 game. Number 1, Charlie Simmer, Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, of course, the Triple Crown line. Number 2, the LAPD line, Adam Deadmarsh, Jason Allison, Ziggy Palffy. I hate to add Gretzky to any Kings list, but this is an awesome line of Tomas Sandstrom, Wayne Gretzky, and Tony Granato. I don't know if this line ever happened, but it would have been great to have a Dustin Brown, Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kempe line. That was Frank in RPV. I'll play along Frank. My personal top 5 favorite Kings would be Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown, Drew Doughty, Rob Blake, and Luc Robitaille. My top 4 greatest Kings, I would go Kopitar, Dion, Robitaille, Jonathan Quick, and Wayne Gretzky. As for top lines, I mean, the Triple Crown line is without a doubt number 1, without any question. But the Kings haven't had a lot of iconic lines. I would have to throw in that 70s line, the 3 players on the Stanley Cup winning team in 2014 that all wore the number 70, Jeff Carter, 77, Tyler Toffoli, 73, and Tanner Pearson, number 70. All right, we're just getting warmed up here with the emails. We will continue here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets fast and easy. Prices actually drop the closer you get to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Gametime's zone deals pick the best seat in the section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? Well, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there's no surprises. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you'll pay. There's no hidden fees. Worried about what happens if plans change? Well, there's the Gametime guarantee. It's got your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, our next email comes from Dylan in San Diego. He says, sorry if this is about to be a depressing question, but what is the most disappointing, unhappiest you felt after a Kings game? Despite the past 4 first-round exits, for me, I'd have to be one game that I attended in Dallas while I was still stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. I drove 3 hours to make it to the game, excited to see my Kings in person for the first time in almost 3 years, only to witness the infamous Drew Doughty knee-on-knee hit that sidelined him for a chunk of the 2021-22 season, not to mention, but it was an overtime loss as well. So I had to wade through a sea of Dallas fans, sit in traffic for an extra 45 minutes, and then begin the return 3-hour journey to my lowly dorm room, returning at close to 2 a.m. That was easily the most deflated, the most deflated game that I have ever seen. But as always, go Kings go. And that was Dylan in San Diego. Yes, I love going to road games, but when you go to those road games and your team doesn't perform well and you've spent a lot of money on airline tickets or invested a lot of time in a long drive, that can be rough. But at least the game you saw, the Kings actually showed up. They lost in overtime. Some disappointing ones for me. October 27th, 2019. My wife and I went to Chicago. We saw her Chargers beat the Bears 17-16 in Chicago, missed a 41-yard field goal as time expired. And then we immediately left, went to the United Center for a game that night, Kings versus Blackhawks. Unfortunately, the Kings absolutely did not show up. They lost 5-1, and it was against a bad Blackhawks team, and the score wasn't as close as that score might indicate. So thank goodness for deep dish pizza to lift my spirits after that one. I think the loss to the Ducks in the Dodger Stadium outdoor game was a pretty big bummer. And while we had the reverse sweep of the Sharks and the miracle on Manchester, the flip side of that was the Sharks coming back from down 4-0 to beat the Kings 5-4 in overtime in a playoff game in LA back in 2011. That was bad. That was the second biggest comeback, by the way, in NHL playoff history, second only to the miracle on Manchester. But I have to say, and this is recency bias, but game 4 of the playoffs this year against the Oilers was right up there with me for the most disappointing losses in Kings history. Our next email comes from Daario in Arizona. He says, man, I loved your podcast with Mr. Evans. I remember listening to the game on the radio, but turned it off after the second period, but something told me to turn it on again. I remember Smith scoring, and I thought, hey, maybe. but it was a while before Simmer scored. I remember that I had to cover my mouth from screaming because my parents were asleep. Bob Miller didn't help any with his emotional play calling. After the game was over, I realized that I witnessed 2 hockey miracles in 2 years. The 2 games inspired me to go to the 1988 Winter Olympics. Was lucky to see Team USA in hockey and figure skating. Back to the miracle on Manchester. The game time goal was scored by Steve Bozak, who ironically is 1 day older than I was. The goal is in my top 5 all time. Of course, the 2 goals by Alec Martinez are up there. Butch Goring against Boston, the 2 goals by Gretzky to tie and break Howe's record. Adam Deadmarsh goal to eliminate Detroit. My favorite goal, Mike Krujolniski on his side and stomach with a player on top of him. Puck flirted over Mike Vernon's glove. If you look closely, Casper was in front of the net with his back to Cush, but turned just in time to have the puck flutter past his face and over Vernon's glove and into the net. Other goals are Luke's goal, sliding on his stomach, Doughty's overtime goal on Bob Miller's last game, which my friend and I were surrounded by Hawks fans who all stayed to cheer for Bob. I often wonder about them because they were very nice people. One goal that always comes to mind is the goal by Bobby Carpenter in Gretzky's first game for the Kings. After Bobby's goal, you can see Gretzky skating to Bobby, hugging him, and then saying, "What a move." Thank you again, Eddie, for all you do. Hopefully your family's doing well. Go Kings, go. And that was Daario in Arizona. I got a text from friend of the show, Paul, who sometimes emails, and he listened to that episode with Daryl Evans on the Miracle on Manchester, and he talked about him being at that game, and I can only imagine. Very jealous. He was a young man at the time, but very jealous. And that type of game has always stuck with me, and my fear of leaving games early, because I'm always afraid something historic could happen. Like if I was at that Miracle on Manchester game, and I'm sure there were some people that left when it was 5-0 after the second period, I would take it to my grave that I left and missed one of the greatest moments in history. So it's very, very rare that I will leave a game early. And I remember another thing I always remember, the Kirk Gibson walk-off homer in the 88 World Series. I always see those brake lights when the ball is flying into the stands, and beyond the mezzanine out there in Dodger Stadium, there's a car, and I see the brake lights, and I always think, who is that person who missed that amazing event because they wanted to beat traffic or whatever. I never want to be put in that situation to miss something historic. So I very rarely ever leave a game early. Bill Anderson in Winnetka checks in. I mentioned, has anybody ever called him Bloody Bill? Because that was a famous Confederate soldier in the Civil War. And Bloody Bill's kind of a cool nickname, I guess, unless you're on the other end of Bloody Bill's, actions there. But anyway, Bill Anderson in Winnetka says, I'm not aware of the reference to Bloody Bill Anderson, nor am I aware of being related to him. There is Whisperin' Bill Anderson, the country singer. I've never heard his voice, but he's in the Country Western Hall of Fame. I did get a call once back in the day when there were phone books asking, hey, are you Bill Anderson, the ceramist? No. Bill had the trivia question last week on UC Jokinen, which I didn't know what he was referencing. He says, take a look at the final NHL season for UC Jokinen. He played for the Oilers, Kings, Blue Jackets, and Canucks in the 2017-18 season, tying an NHL record. So, yes, I did look it up. You are correct. The record for most teams played on in a single season is 4, held by UC Jokinen, Dennis O'Brien, Dave McElwain, and Mark Arcobello. And of those lists of players, UC Jokinen is by far the one I have heard of the most. Ryan Kim in Moore Park says, hey, Eddie, just finished watching your interview with Daryl Evans. Love the show this week, as always. Appreciate the time you spent making the episode. I also wanted to share that my mom got a huge kick out of my name being mentioned on the show as a couple of days regarding my mention of Hockey Authentic. She's a newer Kings fan, my fault, and listens to the show to get informed, and she was cracking up when she heard my name, said I was a local celebrity. And that was Ryan in Moore Park. Well, first of all, hello to Mama Kim, if you are listening or watching this episode. It's never too late to be a Kings fan. And I can't be more sincere when I say this, talking about Daryl Evans. Maybe the nicest man I have ever met. He always responds when I text him, and usually in a very timely manner. He has never said, oh, I can't join you this week. He's always said yes. He's always in a good mood. He's happy. And I always get a kick out of it because he calls me young man when we're done talking. Like I'm 12 or something. Cracks me up. But anyway, Ryan, I'm glad you enjoyed the interview. Glad your mom is listening and watching the show as well. Steven Orlando checks and he says, every day or long time since I've written in. Last week you mentioned an interview that fell through and promised a story about what happened or what was going to be about if you didn't have him on. What's the story? We're on the edge of our seats here. Keep up the great work. Go Kings, go. That's Steve in Orlando. Well, Steve's talking about Mike Fuda. Mike, once again, pushed back our interview. His situation has not been resolved, so I can't share one way or another, but he has not said he can't do it. We're trying to figure it out. So hopefully next week, Mike Fuda will be on the show. We'll see. Up next, I have to give some credit to Ed and Brea on a fact that he was correct on. We'll do that next. You're on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. August 26th, he said. A brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown a Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. FanDuel currently has Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson as the favorite. Crown your champion in August. FanDuel has the Bills, Ravens, and Eagles all at plus 700 as the favorites to win the Super Bowl, or parlay your division winner dark horses. How about the Rams or the Chargers? Visit the FanDuel app today. Start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Our next email comes from Chris in Northern Nevada, in parentheses, Carson City. He says, I wanted to weigh in on your top five. This was the top 5 current Kings players. He says, your top 5 was my top 5. And for those of you watching on YouTube, a refresher course on my top 5 LA Kings right now was Adrian Kempe, number 1, Darcy Kemper, 2, Andre Kopitar, 3, Kevin Fiala, 4, and Quentin Whitefield, number 5. As for Chris's top 5, he had Kopitar 4th and Fiala 3rd. But he says, I can see why you put Kopi higher. Fiala has the potential to be our best player, but sometimes gets in his own way. Bad Kevin. He says, if I were to rank 6 through 10, mine would go like this. Number 6, Doughty. Number 7, Anderson. Number 8, Kuzmenko. Number 9, Fogel. And number 10, Dano. I think Trevor Moore fell off last year, and Brant Clark isn't quite there yet. LaFerriere could crack the top 10 this year, in my opinion, as well. For the top 100 on the Kings, I think only Kempe and Kemper will get in. Being a West Coast team, we don't get a ton of national attention, so I wouldn't be surprised if only Kempe was on it. Love the show. Great content with the offseason, keeping us fans interested every day. And that was Chris in Carson City. I think Kopitar might make it in the top 100. Before last season, ESPN put out a list of the top 100 NHL players. I was going into 2014 or 2024, I should say. Darcy Kemper obviously wasn't on it, and he shouldn't have been. But Andre Kopitar was number 55 on their list of 100. Kempe was 85. So we'll see. As for the 6 through 10 LA Kings, I think I would go with your list as well, but I would probably flip-flop Fogel and Kuzmenko. I haven't seen enough from Kuzmenko yet to say would be ranked ahead of Warren Fogel, but I'd go Doughty 6, Mikey 7, Fogel 8, Kuzmenko 9, and Dano 10. Don in the San Fernando Valley says, every day are here. I know our top 6 D-men are all set, but what about the 7th guy? Injuries happen, so do slumps, so that 7th D-man could turn out to be an important player. Unless something new turns up, it looks like it's going to be between Kyle Burroughs and Jacob Moverara. Which one would you prefer as the 7th defenseman? I know my preference is Moverara for sure. Burroughs is a better skater and more aggressively physical, but he can be a bit error-prone and at least is more easily beaten by attackers than Moverara, in my opinion. Moverara is bigger and stronger with a long reach. He plays a steadier game with few mistakes, moves the puck better than Burroughs, in my opinion, takes fewer penalties too, I believe. I wonder what your other viewers think. Could be wrong, but I would bet most would choose Moverara, and that was Don in San Fernando. Don, I agree with you. If it was my choice, I think Jacob Moverara would be the 7th defenseman. The only thing that might sway me is if maybe Burroughs has the ability to play on his off wing more than Moverara, so that would make him a little bit more versatile if he had to fill in on the left side as well as his natural right side. But I think you said it best. I think Moverara is more reliable. He's steadier, and I think that's what you're looking for in a 7th defenseman. Brian in Los Alamitos says, hello, Chip. Very funny, Brian. I enjoyed the people that watched the Ask Eddie show know what that means. I really enjoyed last night's episode with Russell Morgan. If you're ever in search of a Locked On LA Kings co-host, I would highly suggest Russell Morgan. His views on the Kings are very insightful, and he does a great job covering the team. I could listen to you guys talk Kings hockey all day. With regard to Quentin Byfield, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that Q could potentially be named to the Canadian Olympic team. I think the fact that he was invited to the orientation along with other Hall of Fame caliber NHLers is an indication of the promise they see in Byfield, a smart, creative, talented, and big center who could be a future leader for Team Canada. Even if he doesn't make the team, this should serve as a huge boost to his confidence going into next season, and Kings fans should be lucky he's on our team. And just out of curiosity, was the number 1 overall pick Alexis Lafreniere invited to the orientation? Unfortunately, I have to agree with Russell Morgan. I just don't believe Jim Hiller will give Brandt Clarke the second pairing minutes he needs to develop as an NHL defenseman. He didn't trust Jordan Spence, and I don't think he'll trust Clarke when the game's on the line. Hiller is too much of a hockey traditionalist when defense, size, and veterans are what win you games, not youth or offensive creativity. Thank you, Eddie, for another great week of shows. Go Kings, go. And that was Brian in Los Alamitos. Yeah, I always enjoy talking hockey with Russell Morgan. Great guest, good guy, very knowledgeable. As far as Quentin Byfield goes, I completely agree. There's no downside to him being invited to the Canadian orientation camp. I think it's a huge compliment to him and how he's viewed around the league. Alexis Lafreniere was not invited to the orientation camp. He was the number 1 pick in the 2022 draft, with Byfield going number 2. As far as Jim Hiller and Brandt Clarke, I would say, you talked about him not having faith in Spence, and that's true, but the Kings have obviously invested a lot more in Brandt Clarke. I think they look at him as someone who's definitely a part of their big plans going forward. However, I will concede that, look, if Hiller's on the hot seat and things aren't going well, he's going to lean on those veteran guys and not really care about what's best for the overall health of the team, whether it's later in the year in the playoffs or down the road in future seasons. So I could see what you're talking about, in that when it gets tough, he may go safe and put the veterans out there, but I hope not. The final email comes from Ed in Brea, and he says, last week you were somewhat incorrect. Kings ownership did help our rivals Quacks be established. At the time, Bruce McNall, who owned the Kings, was friends with CEO of Disney, Michael Eisner, and helped convince him to apply for expansion since the Honda Center was being constructed. New commissioner Gary Bettman chose Disney with Eisner and McNall with Gretzky to expand hockey in SoCal. In Hall of Fame announcer Bob Miller's book, I read Miller questioned the decision to help the expansion franchise because it would split the Kings fan base. Also, I think they paid territory rights to the Kings. I agree with you that Kempe is the top LA King. He is slowly becoming a complete player offensively and defensively and being physical too. My second would be Mikey Anderson, since he stepped up when Doughty was out. Kemper is third despite having a Vezina season. However, he played limited games and had an awesome defense in front of him. Still solid. Fourth is Kopitar, and fifth to me is Kuzmenko, since I think the Kings may have one of the best top lines in hockey. As for the Kings announcer situation, I have a theory. It will either be a simulcast with Josh Schaefer, Jim Fox, and Daryl Evans. Curious if the Kings might also consider the first NHL franchise to hire a female play-by-play announcer. Wondering what your thoughts are on the topic. Keep up the good work. Go Kings, go. That was Ed in Brea. Ed is correct. I questioned why in the world would the Kings help bring another team in Southern California when, as he pointed out, that apparently Bob Miller said in his book, you would lose part of your fan base. And that's correct. However, Bruce McNall did have a hand in convincing Michael Eisner, who ran Disney, to get into the hockey business. Now, why would McNall do such a thing? Well, he needed the money. He was paid $25 million by the Ducks for a territorial indemnity fee. So he got special compensation for that. And if you remember the unfortunate history of Bruce McNall, he was in a bad situation financially. He needed money, which is why he made that decision to help the Ducks come in, even though it wasn't a very good decision as far as the long term of, losing fans to another Southern California team. But McNall needed money and eventually would go to prison for his bad financial situation he was in, where he was defrauding people and things like that. So that's why he didn't do it for the good of the Kings or the good of hockey in Southern California, so to speak. He did it for the good of himself because he needed the money. So there was that. So Ed and Brea was actually right. Bruce McNall did have a hand in the Ducks becoming an NHL franchise. As far as a female play-by-play announcer for hockey, there are not many out there right now. Certainly, roles are expanding in broadcasting for women. There are some very good female hockey analysts out there that do a really good job, but I don't know of many play-by-play announcers at all. The Ottawa Senators did hire a female play-by-play announcer to do some games. I don't know that she's the full-time voice, but I know that I think they're the only NHL team that currently has or has ever had a female play-by-play announcer. So I don't know that, again, that there are that many out there right now. So I would say my opinion on if the Kings were to do that, I would be very surprised if the Kings were to do that, just because I don't know that there are that many qualified play-by-play announcers out there right now at this point for women. But I think in the near future, down the road, I think the doors are now open for those types of opportunities. So we could see it at some point. I would be surprised if the Kings would do it this year. All right. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email this week. The show is literally not possible without your participation. If you want to get an email in for a future show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com. As always, you can leave your comments in the YouTube or on YouTube if you're watching in the comments section. We appreciate that. Please stay interactive with the show on social media if you can. X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. That'll do it for another great fan feedback show. These are always some of my favorite shows of the week, especially this time of the year. So thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings go.